Please be seated. So they ran away and told no one. The end. But probably not, though, right? Because here we are, 2,000 years later, celebrating that strange morning when the women went to prepare the body of someone they loved to be buried and found instead that the tomb was empty. Somewhere along the line, whoever figures out these things figured out that that was a weird way to end the Gospel of Mark. So they wrote a couple more endings. That's right, I said a couple, right? There's 2 other endings to the Gospel of Mark. But this is the real one, the original one, from the first and oldest and simplest of the stories of Jesus. That Mark is a very just the facts ma'am kind of a guy. And these are the facts. They showed up. The tomb was empty. The end. Personally, I feel like maybe it was meant to be a bit of a diss to the women, you know? I mean, once again, the women are doing more than their fair share of the work and getting less than their fair share of the credit, yes? You know, it was the women who stuck with Jesus, right? When all the men had bailed, the women were still there at the foot of the cross up until the last second. And here they are about to do this difficult work of preparing him to be buried. And no matter how you think this story ends, no matter how you cut it, they were the ones who saw. They were the first ones to realize what had happened, to be the first witnesses to the resurrection. So I kind of think whoever was writing the story down was like, let's just make them look like a bunch of silly women who ran away and didn't do anything. But isn't that what you would do? I mean, terrifying and amazing is right. They had a plan about how things were going to go, and that's not how they went, right? And even though it was good, it wasn't what they were expecting. They're on their way and they're wondering, how are we going to get this rock moved? How are we going to get this stone out of the way? And they show up and it's been moved. Hooray! Prayer's answered. And that's the end of what they thought was going to happen, right? From then on, everything else is strange and different. And they're not quite sure what to do with it. They're terrified and amazed. Has that ever happened to you? I don't mean, have you ever gone in the morning to prepare a body at a rock-hewn tomb and found that the stone wasn't there anymore and the tomb was empty? Because I'm going to guess no for all of you on that one. I mean, have you ever been surprised by joy? Have you ever found that what you were praying or longing for or hoping for was there and then so much more? Have you ever believed that you would never find a place where you were at home and then found a community who loved and supported and accepted you as you were? Have you ever lost someone that you loved or had a difficult diagnosis or been struggling in your life and then something happens? Maybe it's beautiful music or the way that the light comes through the window or just that same community that comes to surround you and try to be with you even though there's nothing that can be done. That reminds you that there is something more than you, that there is hope and joy in life. Have you ever been at the end of your rope, ready to give up, and then there is something more? Yeah, so have we. Terrifying and amazing, isn't it? Annie Dillard is a religion writer. She writes about how we tend as human beings to turn away from the love of God, right? Like these women, we run. She writes, for you meant only love, and I felt only fear and only pain. Once in Israel, love incarnate came and stood between 2 worlds, and we were all of us afraid. Because, like it or not, we know death, right? We wish we didn't, but we do. We're familiar with the way things are supposed to go, the way things have always been, the way it's going to be. And sometimes it's easier just to stay dead, to just stay stuck in whatever place you're in, because that's the way it's supposed to be. It couldn't possibly be that anyone would love me that much. It couldn't possibly be that I could be that happy, that I could get what I had longed for or dreamed for. And even if it was, or becomes that, it's not going to last. So, best just to run away and not tell anyone what happened. But then, God rolls away the stone. And there's something some sign of life and light and love and hope. Something to remind you that there's a different ending to that story than what everybody else is telling you. And suddenly, you have a resurrection story. Now, if you're in a place of darkness and despair right now, and first of all, thank you for listening to me for this long, because I bet you were, from the beginning, were thinking, this lady has nothing to say to me. I don't feel that way. I don't feel like there's hope. Well, believe it or not, most of us have been in that place too. And this community, if you will let us, will love you through it. Because we believe in resurrection. Because we have experienced resurrection. And if you're thinking, hey, I didn't promise that. I can't do that. Sure you can. Because you have a resurrection story. Maybe even more than one. Sometime in your life where things went even better than planned. When you found a child or a grandchild that you didn't think you'd ever have. When you got that job you had always longed for but had given up on. When you found a community, found hope, found life. And you may not feel like that's that big of a thing, but it is. And if you can remember that story, and what it means to you, then you have to share that story. And I know that's scary, because we don't do that in the Episcopal Church, but I have to explain to you that resurrection stories aren't just about what we think they're about, right? Easter is kind of a weird holiday, if you're looking at it from the outside, you know, like zombie Jesus is back and everyone's hunting for plastic eggs full of candy. Like, what are these people doing? But Easter is about more than that, right? It's about us. It's about our stories. Peter and Paul, they both told their resurrection stories in the readings we read today. Even though neither of them were there, they didn't actually see what had happened. But they had some experience of it, right? And those stories are not just about Easter morning, they're about all of what Jesus was, who he was, what he taught, how he lived. And more importantly, their stories are about how his resurrection changed them. How they became people who could live with hope and share hope and good news. I mean, you should have seen Peter a few days ago, this fool. First he's like, I'll never abandon you, Jesus. And he's like, I don't know who you are. Like 2 seconds later, right? He wants to wash Peter's feet. Peter's like, no. And he's like, yes, I want the whole of me be washed. And suddenly he's this articulate preacher, right? I mean, what happened? Somehow he was transformed. And Paul was coming after the early church with all the might within him. And something happened that changed him and made him the first apostle of our faith. And my hope is that at some point in your life, something has happened that changed you. And I'm not saying you have to tell that story to everybody who will hear it. There may be a time when it feels right to you to share your stories of hope with those who are struggling. But you can also live your stories of hope by being people who believe in a different ending to the story, who believe that there can be life after death, and light out of darkness, and hope out of despair, and that love is stronger than anything. By living from that place, we become a different people, a people transformed. See, I don't like to think that the Gospel of Mark has a weird ending. I think it has a choose-your-own-adventure ending. Remember Choose Your Own Adventure, right? Those books? They still have them, I think. Because it is a choose-your-own-adventure, right? Your life is a choose-your-own-adventure. And this is not the end of the story. This is the beginning, right? The beginning again. You get to begin again in whatever way you feel called to, on this day and on every day. You get to live as people of hope and joy and love, whatever that might mean to you in this day and in this moment. Christ has risen from the dead. Do not be afraid. Go and tell the good news in words and in actions. Go and live your resurrection story.